It's 10 o'clock. This is Sky News at 10, our top story. Battle of the buses. Rishi Sunak pledges money for struggling towns, telling his supporters to ignore the polls.
The only poll that matters is the one on July 4th, the general election.
Labour also launches its battle bus, with Sir Keir Starmer confident he can move on from the Diane Abbott row that has dogged his campaign so far.
What Angie's going to do with this bus is take our message to every single doorstep across the country, 5,000 miles.
Also tonight, families of Israeli hostages call for all parties to accept the Gaza ceasefire plan, despite opposition from some members of the Israeli government. Just the tip of the iceberg, a warning that drugs shortages are heaping pressure on already stretched local pharmacies. History made in the South African election as the ANC loses its majority for the first time in 30 years. Real Madrid win the Champions League for a record 15th time, beating Borussia Dortmund at Wembley. Plus, the weather forecast sent from a lighthouse in County Mayo that saved thousands of Allied lives on D-Day. And we'll take a first look at tomorrow's front pages in our press preview from 10:30. Good evening. The two main parties took to the road today as they launched their battle buses for the election campaign. Rishi Sunak went on the attack against Labour, calling Sir Keir Starmer a weak leader whose deputy, Angela Rayner, was really in charge. Sir Keir himself attempted to move on from the Diane Abbott affair, which has dominated the Labour campaign over the last few days, saying it was time to focus on rebuilding the country. And there was better news tonight for Labour, as a new poll by Opinion suggests it's increased its lead over the Conservatives, with a majority of voters thinking it's been a bad week for the Tory campaign. Here is our political correspondent, Serena Barker-Singh.
You wait ages for one, and then two come along at once. The two main parties launching their battle buses today. Labour trying their best to get back on course after this week's internal fallout over whether Diane Abbott can run as a Labour candidate.
You said last week you weren't going to go get involved in her case. Yesterday you gave your view. You said she was free to stand. So what's changed? Is a leader now allowed to intervene in these processes?
Well, I dealt with that issue yesterday. Today is about taking our argument to the country and getting people back to work. There are millions of people who aren't in work, who are on benefits, who desperately want the dignity and respect of being back to work. We're putting our plan on the table to reform job centres so that they can actually be places that support people back into work, to making sure that we've got a plan for economic inactivity.
Not an ideal week for the Tories either, after one of their own defected to Labour. Rishi Sunak today pledging in Redcar £20 million to 30 towns to level up if the party is re-elected. A small possibility, though, according to one Wipeout poll yesterday stating they could lose hundreds of seats.
The only poll that matters is the one on July 4th, the general election. And what I'm doing is going across our country to every corner of it, talking to as many people as possible about the choice at this election. And that choice is increasingly clear. We're just over a week into this. And what is clear is that we're the only ones who have a plan.
Watching these polls closely are challenger parties, hoping to exploit any weaknesses of the main two.
We just need a couple more percentage points. You know, if we can get to that, we could win a good number of seats. And I feel there's some momentum with us.
Our campaign has started exceptionally well, while Keir Starmer's campaign has blown up in his face.
That's lovely, thank you.
On the South Coast today, Sarah Olney getting a flavour for the campaign as the Lib Dem leader Ed Davey took time out to look after his son. John Swinney making the case for the SNP in Scotland.
The triple whammy of austerity, Brexit and the cost of living crisis, and all of these are a product of Westminster decision-making.
After a rocky first week, Sky News has analysed where the party leaders have been. For Rishi Sunak, 18 out of his 20 visits were in constituencies Boris Johnson won in 2019. The Conservatives desperate to cling on to them. For Keir Starmer, the majority are Tory seats that Labour hope to win this election. With buses now on the road, but polls less on the move, the tone going into week 2, Tories on the defence, Labour firmly on the attack. Serena Bakar-Singh, Sky News.
And let's go live to Downing Street and our chief political correspondent, John Craig. So, John, this evening we've had a new poll out. Some good news for Labour. Tell us more about it.
Well, I'm actually standing outside the Houses of Parliament, not Downing Street, but it's obviously the battle for Downing Street and the battle for seats in the House of Commons that this election is all about. The new poll is by opinion in the Observer, and it shows that Labour is maintaining its very big poll lead over the Conservatives. There have been Tory hopes towards the end of this week that that gap might begin to narrow, but yet again, it's another poll showing Labour 20 points ahead. This is opinion, which up to now has not had Labour's lead as high as 20 points. And the new figures are Labour 45%. That's up 4. Tories 25 down 2. Lib Dems just 8. And Reform up to 11. That's up a few. Now, interestingly, this poll suggests that voters don't particularly like the Tories' policy of bringing back national service. 45% think that's a bad idea. However, 52% think their plan for a triple lock plus for pensioners, big boost for pensioners, is a good idea. Now, right on cue in the Sunday Telegraph, Jeremy Hunt, the Chancellor, is talking about pensions and attacking Labour. And in what sounds very much like an attack on the former Chancellor Gordon Brown, he says this: Labour betrayed pensioners before. We will never allow it to happen again. Well, that's a clear reference to 1999 when Gordon Brown was bitterly attacked for a derisory 75p increase in the state pension. And Mr Hunt says, just as Labour did in the past, when they have a black hole in their finances, they'll go for backdoor taxes on pensioners. And he claims, of course, there's only one party you can trust. Pensioners know which party introduced the triple lock, which parties introduced increased the state pension by $3,700. Of course, both the big parties, in fact, all the parties, have vowed to keep the triple lock. But it shows that the Tories, if they're talking about pensions, going again after the so-called grey vote, the over 65s, which, of course, is, you can call that a core vote strategy, if you like. Look at the places where the PM has been, Tory-held constituencies. Look at the sort of policies they're talking about. As for Keir Starmer, well, he's going into Tory territory in an interview in The Sun on Sunday because he says that Labour will bring down net migration by training more UK workers and banning bad bosses to get Britain back to work, he says. So Keir says... He says, with Labour, Britain will be less reliant on migration by training more UK workers. He says, mark my words, the future Labour government will bring down net migration. I'm determined the governments I lead will put into practice and ban the practices used by bad bosses, as he calls them. So Labour are starting to unveil some policies. They're also talking about skills and apprenticeships this weekend. Up to now, of course, the last few days, Labour's been dragged into a self-inflicted row, really, over Diane Abbott. We shall wait and see what happens on Tuesday when Labour's national executive meets, but it does look, following Sir Keir's rather hasty, abrupt U-turn, that she will be allowed to be a candidate. Whether she will decide to do that or retire, we'll have to wait and see what she decides. The other key thing over the next few days is the first TV debate. That's on Tuesday. Tuesday. And of course, these have in the past been a game changer in previous general election campaigns. But the Tories will be pretty dismayed tonight by this latest opinion poll. They will have been hoping that the polls would start to shift after the first week of campaigning, but they are stubbornly staying where they are, with Labour with a pretty healthy 20-point lead, according to poll by opinion in The Observer.
Our chief political correspondent, John Craig, with the latest there from Westminster. John, thank you. And on the 12th of June, Sky News will be holding an election leaders event in Grimsby. The Prime Minister Rishi Sunak and the Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer have been invited to attend, and we're looking for a live audience to join us on the night. So if you'd like to take part, scan the QR code that you can see on your screen now. And tomorrow morning, Trevor Phillips will be joined by Labour's Shadow Home Secretary Yvette Cooper, Conservative Health Secretary Victoria Atkins, the SNP's Stephen Flynn, and Plaid Cymru's leader, with analysis from a top panel. That's live from 8:30 tomorrow, right here on Sky News. Israel's opposition leader has urged Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu not to ignore President Biden's plan to end the fighting in Gaza, saying that there is a deal on the table and it should be made. Families of Israeli hostages also urged all parties to accept the plan. And while Hamas has said it's looking at it positively, tonight, two politicians from the Israeli far right have said there is no chance of ending the war without the total elimination of Hamas. So what exactly is in President Biden's proposal? Well, the first phase would include a 6-week ceasefire. Hamas would release a number of hostages, including women, the elderly, and the wounded, in exchange for Palestinian prisoners. 600 trucks of aid a day would enter the Gaza Strip, and hundreds of thousands of temporary housing units would be provided. The second part would involve Hamas handing over all the remaining hostages and Israel withdrawing all of its forces from Gaza. The third and final phase would see the introduction of a major reconstruction plan for Gaza. Our Middle East correspondent Alistair Bunkle reports now from Tel Aviv.
There have been Saturday night protests across Israel for months, but President Biden's speech has given fresh hope for a hostage deal, and thousands turned out in Tel Aviv calling for Netanyahu to accept one.
The only thing that the Israeli government has to do is bring them back on any price. Bring them back. First, bring them back, then do whatever you want.
What's more important, fighting Hamas or bringing hostages home?
Bringing them back home, definitely that. Hamas will stay here. It's an evil that's not going anywhere, and we can't eliminate it in one moment. So bring them home now.
The White House did not collaborate with Netanyahu before Biden's speech and only gave the Israeli Prime Minister's office short notice before it was delivered. This was a move by Washington to break the deadlock. Biden's speech on Friday night represented a shift in the US position. They are now saying that the war should end, and in their opinion, Hamas can no longer carry out an October the 7th start attack. And that has given people here hope that a deal might this time be possible. But what is not yet clear is whether the positions of the Israeli government and of Hamas have also shifted in order that a deal could be possible. Biden's speech has been supported by the French, German, and British governments.
I think this is an important moment, and one that we should seize in order to bring this conflict to an end, not just now, but permanently.
In Gaza today, where the fighting has continued, there is also support for a deal, but for different reasons.
This proposal came late, but better late than never. Therefore, we hope from God, the American administration and the European community in general to continue to put pressure on Israel for a ceasefire and to save the children and the women of Gaza, because most of the martyrs in the Gaza Strip are children and women.
Hamas's leaders in Gaza are yet to give a formal response to Biden's proposal. The Israeli government has told Sky News it is waiting for that before making its next move. The differences that scuppered previous negotiations still exist. A ceasefire is far from guaranteed. Alistair Bunkle, Sky News, in Tel Aviv.
Pharmacists are warning that increasing shortages of medication are heaping pressure on already stretched local chemists. New figures show a big jump in the number of alerts, which warn pharmacists when some drugs are in short supply. Our North of England correspondent, Charlotte Leeming, reports.
Musician Kevin Pearson was diagnosed with ADHD 15 years ago at the age of 45. He takes regular medication to manage his symptoms, such as difficulty focusing and restlessness. But in recent weeks, he struggled to get hold of them due to the drugs being in short supply.
I was frightened to go on it because the fact that if I couldn't guarantee it would continue, then I'd be in a worse position than when I started. I'd be better off without going on it. It's like just setting you up to fail.
Kevin's situation is far from unique. At Rimington's pharmacy in Bradford, they've been helping patients for nearly 200 years. But in the last few months, they've struggled to track down the medicines people need for a wide range of conditions, like epilepsy, ADHD and diabetes.
For certain conditions, it's vital for the patient. And for certain medications, it's important that they stay on the same brand. However, it's just an increasing problem.
New figures from the National Pharmacy Association found the number of serious shortage alerts being sent to pharmacists has gone up from 15 between 2019 and 2021 to 50 in the last 2 years, putting pressure on an already stretched service.
We think it's fluctuations in prices, exchange rates, manufacturing problems. But actually, as well, in the UK, it's really important to say that we probably pay less for our medicines compared to equivalent other Western nations. And we think that this visibility of the problems of the supply chain is part of this both chronic underfunding of the medicine supply chain and community pharmacy over the last 10 years.
The National Pharmacy Association is now calling on political leaders and the NHS to take urgent action to better fund pharmacists in our communities across the UK. They say that way it will help stabilise the UK's medicine supply chain. For patients like Kevin, that can't happen soon enough. For him, drug shortages aren't only worrying, they could also be dangerous. Charlotte Leeming, Sky News, Bradford.
A 20-year-old man has appeared in court, charged with the murder of a woman and the attempted murder of another on a beach in Bournemouth. Nassin Saadi from Croydon made a short appearance at Poole's Magistrates Court. He's charged with stabbing 34-year-old Amy Gray to death on Durley Chine Beach and seriously injuring 38-year-old Leanne Miles. He's due to appear in Winchester Crown Court on Tuesday. There's been a heavy police presence in central London for 2 protests. Thousands marched to Parliament Square for a demonstration organised by the far-right activist Tommy Robinson. A large police cordon separated the crowd from a counter-protest staged by Stand Up to Racism. Police made 2 arrests. Britain's biggest water company has been told that it faces a fine of more than £40 million over the payment of a shareholder dividend in spite of its poor performance. The development will add further pressure to Thames Water as it moves towards a potential temporary nationalisation under a debt mountain of more than £15 billion. Ticketmaster owner Live Nation has admitted there's been what it called unauthorized activity on its database after a group of hackers said they had stolen the personal details of 560 million customers. The hacking group is reportedly demanding a £400,000 ransom payment to prevent the data from being sold to other parties. Boeing's Starliner space launch has been delayed by 24 hours, minutes before it was due to take off from Florida, bound for the International Space Station. The test flight to take personnel to the International Space Station has been repeatedly delayed for years and several times this week. Let's go to South Africa now, where in a historic election result, the ANC party has lost its majority. So far, 99% of the votes have been counted. South Africa's Election Commission says it is ready to announce the full results tomorrow. Well, the ANC, which has ruled South Africa for around 30 years, has 40% of the vote and will likely have to do a deal with another smaller party to stay in power. The current president and leader of the ANC, Cyril Ramaphosa, said needs the support of 50% of MPs to survive. Sky's Africa correspondent Yusra El-Bagir reports.
An election with more twists and turns than a scripted drama. The ANC has lost its monopoly on power, 3 decades after ushering in the democracy, now at play in its demise. The verdict is in, and the decades of ANC dominance has come to an end. And all of these smaller parties who've been relegated to the opposition bench could now be a part of a coalition government. The ANC has fallen well short of a parliamentary majority, with a 17% plunge from the 2019 elections.
It is a dip, and it is also a sign that democracy is at work in South Africa.
The largest party will still have to negotiate with some of its rivals to form a coalition government.
We want to work with the ANC. If there's any party that we can work with and work properly, is the ANC. Because ANC, when compromised, is not arrogant.
But negotiations won't be easy, especially with the main opposition party watching.
We will do what we can to prevent what I've called, since April last year, from this very room, a doomsday coalition. A coalition between the ANC and the radicals in the EFF or the Umkhonto we Sizwe party, because those policies will take South Africa down the same road to Zimbabwe.
The ANC isn't just suffering from declining support, but the wild card of their former leader and President Jacob Zuma's party Umkhonto we Sizwe splitting votes. To survive the blow of this election, the ANC may have to turn to Zuma's MK party to form a coalition. The ANC has presided over South Africa's 30 years of post-apartheid democracy, but its president Cyril Ramaphosa may not see another term.
It will be a lesson for them, yeah, because when they are there, they're just doing things the way they like. They don't care about the people on the ground anymore.
The sun is setting on South Africa as we know it, and the days that come will bring a new era in its democracy, for better or for worse. Yusra El-Bagir, Sky News, Johannesburg.
Anti-vaxxers, climate change deniers and those who have a problem with the mainstream media are nothing new. But the pandemic helped many conspiracy theorists find their voice, and events like last month's Truth Festival in Cumbria have made it easier for them to be heard. Sky's Tom Cheshire investigates why an increasing number of people are choosing to embrace misinformation as fact.
I do not consent!
Young children taught to shout slogans of the anti-vax movement. Welcome to the Weekend Truth Festival. This is where the conspiracy theory movement, born in COVID, has become a true community, one they would describe as the freedom movement.
Now, how do you convince a population to subdue them? But guess what? It was a psychological operation, a total psyop to take away your independence and freedom.
I've come here to West Cumbria to understand why a movement born in lockdown is thriving to this day, and why other festivals are being held up and down the country, in Sussex, Hertfordshire, Glasgow, Dorset, Surrey, here again in Cumbria and in Leicestershire all summer long. And that means bedding in. On the first night, I meet Teresa, a former civil servant who's warm and friendly and offers me endless cups of tea.
I didn't think I'd be here 3 years ago in a place that I am, but this journey's been a great journey for me because I've met such wonderful people, you know, friendships that I've formed.
That journey started with COVID and her father moving into a care home just before lockdown.
It wasn't nice, you know, to go and visit your father and see him behind through the glass, to not be able to give him the love and care that he deserved. You just don't get over that, do you, really?
There are all sorts of divides in the UK, and some of this very bitterly felt across political lines, across party lines, across ideological lines. But I think this might be the deepest. 'Cause when you speak to people here, they reject some of the shared assumptions, the shared beliefs, the shared reality that most of the country agrees on. I listen in on several talks and hear that COVID was an attempted genocide, that there is a Satanist cult planning to murder everyone, and that I, as an employee of the mainstream media, are part of it. Children watch on for all of this.
So why would they want to take away your independence and freedom? They're planning something very, very nefarious.
Most people insist they're neither on the left nor the right. But many of the talking points, especially around depopulation, the idea that the native-born population is being replaced, echo the far right.
So what does Rishi Sunak do? He's injecting with a biochemical weapon. Everybody's getting sick, and he's saying you're not going to get sick anymore. So there's going to be no sickness benefits. They've put we're back to a third world country, right? It's where he comes from. These third world countries, right, where that's...
Rishi Sunak doesn't come from a third world country. He's from Southampton, or Winchester.
Oh, I thought he was an Indian.
No, he's British. He's born...
Oh, he's British. Oh, well, but what defines you as British?
Well, he was born in the UK. Some are organising their own political parties. And another newly launched initiative is recruiting candidates to stand in the general election, in order, in their words, to halt the globalists. It might seem fringe, but festivals like these are being held up and down the country this summer. And the organisers have promised that this one will return next summer too. This movement isn't going anywhere. Tom Cheshire, Sky News, West Cumbria.
Right, let's get the latest sport now from Sky Sports News and Vishali.
This Sky News Sports Bulletin is brought to you by Vitality. Getting more people more active. Live life with Vitality.
There are so few players in world football who've got a CV to compare with yours in terms of honours. But the one thing you haven't got is that silverware for your country.
Yeah.
That matters to you, doesn't it?
Of course. Probably had one of the hardest moments of my career, playing in the Euros final and losing that. But I feel that the project that definitely Gareth and Steve have started here, you know, from Russia to the Euros and then now leading into Germany, you want to be a part of it. I think the talent that we've got in depth in the squad in all areas is probably up there with one of the best one of the best teams, you know, going to compete in the Euros. But we've got that pressure on us now. You know, we got to a semi-final in the World Cup, we got to a Euros final, we came third in the Nations League. But I feel now we have to take that pressure on, like we do at Manchester City, you know, like the lads do at Arsenal or Liverpool. There's pressure every time you go onto the field, and we need to enjoy that. We need to make sure that we feed off of that pressure and don't shrink, because I've seen many England teams shrink over the years when the pressure comes on them. But you know, embrace it and have a little bit of, I said yesterday to lads, you know, you need a little bit of arrogance when you come to places like this. You need to be a little bit arrogant on the field. Don't be cocky, you know, don't make sure that things are happening that shouldn't be happening. But to have the pressure that we've got on our shoulders, we should embrace it and, you know, make sure that we live off that. I always found that we found it hard when we come against bigger nations. We was fine with we'll call it smaller nations, but the bigger nations, we struggled to get results, and that's something that as a group of players we identified that we needed to, when we're coming against these big nations now, start, you know, getting results away from them. I feel that the changing point for me in the England was when we went to Spain, Seville I think it was, and won. That was the time where, as a group of players, we thought we can actually do something now.
I think that's when it changed from the media perspective, and maybe from the supporters, because it was such a convincing performance, and you dominated the ball as well.
Yeah.
In their own backyard, a team that's known for keeping the ball, and won it, and that did feel like a moment of change, I must admit.
I feel as well. I feel that, you know, people look back and I think there's certain moments, especially in my international career, where I look back and I say, okay, that could have been the change, you know, where the penny dropped for us all.
Let me ask about Germany to come then. Is this your best chance? Is this England's best chance of silverware on an international level in, I don't know, you pick a time scale? It feels like that to me. I don't want to crank the pressure up, but that's,
No,
but that's what it feels like. And I think you put the pressure on yourselves as players.
We have
like
to,
that.
as I said, we have to put the pressure on. We can't hide behind the fact that we're all very...
This Sky News Sports Bulletin is brought to you by Vitality.
And a bit of breaking news now concerning the Champions League final. The Met Police say they made 53 arrests at Wembley Stadium this evening. In a statement, it said, "We're aware of media reporting about ticketless fans trying to enter the Champions League final at Wembley. We're confident that the overwhelming majority of attempts to unlawfully gain access to Wembley this evening were unsuccessful, thanks to the efforts of officers, stewards and other stadium staff." Officers have made 53 arrests at Wembley, 5 for pitch invasion and the majority of others for attempts to breach security. Now, next week marks 80 years since the D-Day landings. It's seen as a turning point in World War II, but it could have ended in disaster were it not for a weather report from Ireland. The forecast from a 21-year-old postmistress postponed the offensive by 2 days, saving thousands of Allied lives. Our senior Ireland correspondent, David Blevins, reports now from County Mayo.
It's a long way from Normandy, but the occupants of this lighthouse on the west coast of Ireland changed the course of D-Day with a weather warning.
The English got back directly to Blacksod and says, "Please check, please repeat."
The forecast had been sent by Vincent Sweeney's parents. He's the current lighthouse attendant.
We have the first gaze into the Atlantic. Any weather that's coming in will come in over us. But this depression with northwest winds was coming in directly over Blacksod, down through the UK into the Channel, and that would have hit Normandy in about 5 hours. So it was critical.
It was Maureen Sweeney's 21st birthday when she reported force 6 wind and a rapidly falling barometer, unknowingly postponing the invasion by 2 days. Fergus Sweeney says his grandmother, an Irish postmistress, saved the D-Day landings from disaster. Do you ever think how the world might look today if your grandparents hadn't reported the weather forecast they did?
Yeah, I mean, it'd certainly be a different world, I think, today. I mean, you can imagine what would have happened to the Allies had they gone during the bad weather. The invasion would have been a disaster, and that would have changed the world we live in. The world we live in today is dictated by what happened at the end of the Second World War, and so everything that we know would be vastly different.
The US House of Representatives acknowledged Maureen's contribution. She died aged 100 shortly after her grandson recorded her memories.
Eisenhower was making up his mind, but when he saw the report from Blacksod Point, it confirmed that his was right, and it went ahead then.
Lighthouses play a critical role around the coastline of this island nation, but the keepers of this one could never have imagined that the lives of 150,000 Allied troops were in their hands. For passing seafarers, it's a vital landmark, also serving as a refueling station for search and rescue aircraft. The keepers of this light still saving lives 80 years on. David Blevins, Sky News at Blacksod Point in County Mayo.
Well, that was Sky News at 10. Coming up, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's papers in the press preview. Tonight, we're joined by the writer and broadcaster Amy Nicole-Turner and former government advisor Mercy Muroki. Among the stories we'll be discussing this on the front of The Observer, the headline, Sunak suffers poll blow as cash for votes, row erupts. We'll be right back.
Evacuation, you must leave.
For many people, Harvey is far from over. Christchurch has been changed forever by what happened here.
There was a river of blood coming out of the mosque. That's a scene that you don't forget.
Ida has certainly left its mark on New Orleans.
It just feels heartbreaking.
We help you understand the world with us. We are standing on the supply line right into the heart of America's opioid crisis. I've reported from around the world and around the UK. Are you trying to run me over, Sir Philip?
No, go away.
Look like it, sir. Will you respond to those who've made accusations, Sir Philip?
Can you go away?
Joe Biden knows the celebrations are over, and this is a country in crisis.
You don't want to be remembered this way. You always want to be remembered in something positive.
It is almost impossible to predict where these fires will go next. This gives you an idea of the strength of those winds, strong enough to bend and twist metal.
Do you regret the tweet, Gary?
There's no sign, publicly at least, of either side being willing to give ground. How do you reassure the public that all of these mistakes wouldn't be made again? I'm Greg Milam, and I'm Sky's chief North of England correspondent.
Hello there, you're watching the press preview. A first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. In the next half hour, we'll see what's making the headlines with the writer and broadcaster Amy Nicole-Turner and the former government advisor Mercy Muroki. Welcome both. So let's see what is on some of those front pages. While Labour extending its lead over the Conservatives in a new opinion poll, leads the Observer. With this headline, Sunak suffers a poll blow as cash for votes row erupts. In reaction to that poll, the Tories are demanding Rishi Sunak cut taxes to save the party from oblivion at the election. That's according to the Mail on Sunday. The Sunday Telegraph leads on Jeremy Hunt's warning that Labour will betray pensioners again as he pledges no changes to pension taxes under a Conservative government. The Express also leads on pension taxes with the headline, Labour's £1,000 tax raid on OAPs. And according to the Sunday Times, former Labour MPs, including Diane Abbott, have reportedly been offered peerages if they give up their seats to make way for allies of Starmer. And a reminder that by scanning the QR code that you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's papers while you watch us. And we are joined tonight by Amy Nicole-Turner and Mercy Muroki. Thank you so much for being with us, taking a look at some of the Sunday papers. OK, let's begin with the Observer and that poll that I was just mentioning, new latest opinion poll. Mercy, this isn't going to make good reading for the Conservatives because it looks like everything they've done this week hasn't really worked.
Yes, of course, it's not something to be welcomed, and we have known they've been behind in the polls quite significantly so for a while, so it's not exactly going to come as a huge surprise either. I think, there's still several more weeks to go off campaigning. We've got this debate with Keir Starmer, Rishi Sunak going head-to-head with him on Tuesday. So I think what the Prime Minister is going to try to do is actually use that opportunity, use these opportunities, these more visible sort of head-to-heads, as an opportunity really to sort of put his platform to people in the country. I'm sure they're hoping they'll make up some ground, and I'm sure the Prime Minister will say the only poll that matters is the general election poll. You know, all is to play for, I think, but, you know, it's not going to be a welcome poll, I think, for the Conservatives.
But shall we just talk about the polling for a second, because it's quite astounding when you look at it, 20 points ahead. So when Blair came in 97, he was 12 points ahead, and that was lauded as a massive victory. So this is just unprecedented. They're only a few points ahead of the Lib Dems at this point. And what does the man who can't organise his own umbrella do today? Well, he nails another little thing in the coffin of the Conservative Party by offering cash to marginal Tory seats. Now, this had nothing to do with regenerating the North, because they've been trying that for 14 years, haven't quite managed to level up, with things like HS2 being just scrapped, the money completely wasted. But he's promised a cash injection to marginal Tory seats.
Let's just remind, what the pledge actually is. So £20 million to 30 towns across the country, and Labour have said that it's an unfunded pledge.
It's very reminiscent of when Rishi stood up in, I think it was Tunbridge Wells, and said he was going to divert money from deprived areas, maybe Labour-run areas, into Tunbridge Wells.
It's 17 of the £20 million pots went to towns in areas won by the Conservatives in 2019. It's not all of them. And look, if money is going to towns that need money, I'm not going to sit here and complain about that. And I don't think the people in those towns are going to complain about that. So I think, you know, the headline is a bit sensationalist. These are votes, constituencies that, yes, were won by Tories in 2019. A lot of those constituencies were poorer than the average constituencies the Tories were used to winning, and that's why it was such a shock, the 2019. So actually, these are towns that do need this money.
But they have left a lot out, and I think it's just about legal bribery by anyone's estimations.
Let's just take a look at another headline, the Mail on Sunday here. Tories SOS to Rishi, so let's pull up the Mail on Sunday. Tories SOS to Rishi, give us tax cuts now. So, I mean, this again coming after this pretty dramatic poll that shows the 20-point lead. What do you make of this strategy, Marcy, and then the story?
Yeah, so this is a group, the Popular Conservatism. It's a right-wing movement, the right of the party, and it was launched by ex-Prime Minister Liz Truss. So they're known as the Popcons. And they're basically saying, you know, we are obviously massively behind in the polls. So what you need to do now is to give or promise voters a tax cut. Now, clearly, given the state of the public finances, huge tax cuts are probably not going to come down the road. Even Labour are not promising huge tax cuts. Lots of people are going to be brought in to paying higher rates of tax because of stealth taxes. So I don't think this is a realistic policy. And actually, you know, for me, I think we do need to see something perhaps more sensible than what Liz Truss was trying to do. So if Rishi Sunak can come on the platform and say, look, be honest with voters, we can't give you tax cuts, but here's what we can promise reasonably in the foreseeable future. I think voters will appreciate that honesty. But at the moment, I think, you know, even the Labour Party are not actually acknowledging that, you know, workers are going to be brought into paying higher levels of tax because of that fiscal drag.
I just think polling consistently suggests that people aren't as interested in these very small tax cuts. They're more interested in the cost of living. What's the point in a tiny tax cut when everything is so expensive? And it's the only time I've actually ever agreed with Lee Anderson, because he recently said Rishi could put go down the chimney of every house in the UK and put £1 million down there, and they're still not going to vote for him. People are sick of not being able to afford anything. And that tiny little bit of national insurance that equated to, what, about £900 a year, it just doesn't make sense when we are living with the policy legacy of Brexit, which was essentially sanctions on our own trade, and the impact of austerity, which has just made our public services completely eroded, and the cost of living.
The economy is doing better than expected. The economy is doing better than expected, and we're not the only country at all, by any means, that is experiencing a cost of living crisis. So I think to simply just, you know, blame it on Brexit is hard.
Not just Brexit.
Let's take a look at the Sunday Telegraph. Interesting story about a Labour promise. So this is Keir Starmer's plans to charge private schools 20% VAT straight away, should he win the keys to number 10. And here we're hearing another private school falls victim to the VAT raid. And it's a school, a prep school in Norfolk. Amy.
Well, I just think it's interesting use of the word victim. The victim. These children will have to go to state schools. Two things. The first is that, well...
Can I just say, it's a private school where almost a third of pupils have special needs.
Yes, of course, but many students in the state sector who can't afford... 93% of children go to state school and lots of them will have special needs. And in the piece, it says... parents have an old banger, they don't go on holiday. For some of them, the grandparents pitch in. That shouldn't be the case. It shouldn't be the case that people have to live like that to expect a decent education. And actually, if you look at the way school fees have risen over the past 10 years, they've gone up way more than 20%, always above inflation. And guess what? Students haven't been leaving in their droves. It's true schools have been closing, but that's more to do with the birth rate falling and there not being enough students to make the class sizes. So I think it's a bit of a myth. And lots of it's often cited that 25% of children will leave these schools, but the parents haven't been consulted in any of these surveys, and it's been debunked by the IFS. And I expect that when this policy does come into action, very few of these children will move schools. It is terrible for them to move schools, though. But think about people living in temporary accommodation. They're moved around the country. Their children are moving all the time. It shouldn't be the case that these 7% of children...
I think it's incredibly unfair, and I think, it's incredibly unfair for parents to be penalised in this way, especially parents who are happy to pay out of their own pocket, in this case in particular, for parents of special needs children. If a parent has worked hard, is willing to make sacrifices and is willing to pay, £10,000 in this school, it's £7,800 for the younger pupils. If they're willing to do that from their own pocket and is saving the state money as a result, I don't see why they should then be penalised by basically being priced out. It is the case that many private schools do offer a higher quality of education. So the only people who suffer if this policy comes into place, if Labour win the general election, are the kids who will be forced to go into lower quality schools in their local area.
That's my whole point. It shouldn't be a suffering to have to go to the schools that 93% of the population attend. That should be a given that children can expect a decent level of education. And a tax break for private schools just will never make sense.
Let's finish. We don't have a lot of time for this, but let's just finish, on a key international story. Front page of The Observer, Netanyahu, US Gaza deal is a non-starter. It's also front page of the Sunday Times. This is this deal, or, sort of proposal by Biden yesterday for some kind of peace, but already there have been two key players in the Israeli government that have said no to it. Mercy, what do you make of it?
Yeah, so this deal that Biden had set out, it was a 3-point deal, essentially. The first point was for a 6-week ceasefire. The second was for remaining hostages to be returned and for the reconstruction of Gaza. And Benjamin Netanyahu, who obviously relies heavily on the right of his party, some of them are saying, actually, if you accept this deal, we're not going to be happy. What they've said is basically we're not going to accept anything that calls for a permanent ceasefire, and that is the only terms they have.
Amy, forgive me, we're going to have to go to the break, but we'll definitely discuss this in the next hour. Thank you both so much for now. Stay with us, though. Coming up, David Beckham's been named as a King's Foundation ambassador as he bonds with King Charles over jars of organic honey. That's according to the Mail on Sunday.
I wish I was surprised, but unfortunately I'm not. But whilst that sounds very scary, 21,000 people will be diagnosed with melanoma, I think it's important to say two things. First of all, if it's caught early, around 9 out of 10 people will survive 10 years after a melanoma diagnosis. Catching it early is key. But also, 17,000 of those 21,000 could be prevented. And whilst early treatment is brilliant and we've got more and new and interesting and innovative treatments for even late-stage melanoma, if you could avoid getting it in the first place, that would be better for everybody. But it is vital that we stay out of the sun in the hottest hours between about 11 and 3, that you wear a good high-factor SPF of at least 30, and you need to check the star rating on the back, and that star rating needs to be 4 or 5. And that means you're protected against UVA and UVB. Pop on a hat. You know, these are the things that make a difference. People who we don't necessarily put sun cream on their heads, they should do, but everybody needs to wear a hat. So sun protection is key, and avoiding sunbeds. People often worry, and they worry, for example, about, oh, if I put on sun cream, I'm not going to get enough vitamin D. And research from Australia shows very clearly that we don't put on enough sun cream and we don't reapply it often enough. People are definitely getting their vitamin D. You need to be using about 2 fingers worth on just your face and neck, 2 fingers worth on your arms, 2 fingers worth on your upper legs, 2 fingers worth on your lower legs. And actually that's about a shot glass of cream to cover your whole body every couple of hours. And if you're in the water, as soon as you get out of the water as well. There are 3 kinds of skin cancer, and melanoma is the kind that comes from moles, and we use the ABCDE rule. So A stands for asymmetry. Generally, moles are broadly symmetrical. You could fold the 2 halves together. And if it looks like one bit is growing off in a different direction, it's not symmetrical anymore. That's something to see your doctor about. The borders should be nice and smooth. That's the B. If one becomes a little bit raggedy, go to the doctor. C is for colour, that you need to have less than 2 colours. And if you do have 2 colours, that again, that they're symmetrical. D, if it's under about 6 millimetres, then we tend not to worry. And E, and here's the most important one, evolving. If your mole is changing, get it checked. And with regards to the other kind of skin cancers, if you have a sore or a scaly patch or a lesion that is different and isn't getting better, go and get that checked out.
Welcome back. You're watching the press preview. With me now, the writer and broadcaster Amy Nicole-Turner and the former government advisor Mercy Muroki. OK, let's take a look now at the story in the Sunday Telegraph. Let's pull up the front page there. And this is Yvette Cooper saying, basically train for jobless will end reliance on migrants. And this is all about training unemployed Britons to do jobs normally taken by overseas workers, to cut those keywords in this election, net migration. Mercy.
Yeah, so net migration running extremely high, so 672,000 in the year to June 2023, which says here it's almost 3 times the pre-Brexit average. Obviously, Labour have traditionally not had a fantastic record on immigration. They've often been accused of allowing too much immigration in the past. And they know immigration is a big issue for voters. It's a really big issue, especially if they want to win back some of those constituencies they lost. So this is what they're offering, training for people who aren't in employment. We have huge levels of unemployment in this country, and stopping really the incentives that there are at the moment for businesses to bring in migrant workers. My concern with this is that people have not wanted to do those jobs. You know,
which can I just say which ones? So the roles would be care, construction,
yes,
and engineering.
Yes, I can't really see how you can what kind of incentives they'd be able to bring in that would suddenly lead to people going to take these jobs when they don't currently do that. one of the reasons they don't do that in sectors like care, which is where my mum works, she works as a care assistant, they're very poorly paid, you know, and it's a very difficult job. And so, you know, I see the only incentive really being actually increasing the pay for these people. I'm quite passionate that, you know, the care sector in particular should see increases, but I just don't think training really is necessarily going to be the thing that incentivises.
When I first saw this, I thought it was about medical workers, so training our own nurses, not taking doctors from red list countries that have a shortage of doctors themselves. I thought it was going to be to do with that. But when I look further into it, it's about care, construction and engineering. So I just feel like it's the Labour Party trying to say, look, we are doing something about this legal migration number, when actually I'm not sure, like Mercy says, what it's really going to do, because I think the problem particularly with the care sector is there's no career progression, they're not paid well. People are coming from overseas, they're bringing their families to live here in the UK, which I think surely that costs the state arguably a lot more than just paying a UK-based care worker twice the salary, which would be a great incentive, because I know there are plenty of people who want to work in care, but just would make more working in a cafe, is the reality. So the real incentive would be pay them properly.
Yeah, I think we can agree on that. And obviously, you know, the Conservatives have been in power for a long time. I think, essentially, the country's not working very well at the moment, and we do need some bold, fresh ideas. So what I would, when we do get to these leadership debates we're going to have on Tuesday between Sir Keir Starmer and Rishi Sunak, I hope that they can actually come to the country and say, we're going to stop tinkering around the edges, and we're actually going to offer some bold ideas, especially when it comes to sectors that we really do need but are underpaid.
Yeah, so a bold idea would just be to say this is legal migration and these people are here doing jobs that are very important. The end. Get so upset
We'll
about
see what
this
comes
issue.
out of that debate. We have 1 minute to look at a nice, you know, a sort of feel-good story, possibly. Front page of the Mail. Beckham's top ambassador role from King. So, Amy, what's this about, beyond the fact that they bond over honey?
I think this is about David Beckham doing more sucking up to the royal family, because it's what he's very, very good at. Yet he's yet to get a knighthood. He's not Sir David Beckham. He queued for 4 days or whatever, wasn't that long, but, you know, roughly that long, to see the Queen after she died. Do you remember that? When he stood in the queue with everyone? And he didn't get a knighthood, so he's just been given an ambassador role.
Only a few seconds.
I think it's very unjust, actually, that he doesn't have a knighthood when so many other lesser sports people have knighthoods. So, yeah, I hope he does get one.
He might get one now because of the honey.
Well, we'll see. Amy Nicole-Turner and Mercy Moroki, thank you so much. We'll see you again in the next hour. And that is it. Coming up next on Sky News, we'll have all the latest on the election campaign, with both main parties taking to the road in battle buses. Stay with us.